Alright, guys, I'll just have to go back to the 90s for today. For some reason, I can't get the technology. It's a wonderful thing. That's all I'll say. Alright, so what's happening in the Maxwell case here? What's going on? Not a lot's actually going on since we last spoke, especially because yesterday one of the jurors got sick. So nothing happened yesterday, Thursday. But I'll give the rundown from, I guess, the beginning really quick, just so people can get in the room before I cover what happened since we last talked. Obviously last week we had the jury selection. We had one of the witnesses testify, Jane. Prosecution lays out its case. I want to tell you a story about a girl named Jane. Then defense is like, ever since man, first walked the earth, he's been blaming women, even the apple. Still a weird thing, These are things we're going to have to keep track of throughout the case, so I'll just hit on really fast, details we don't want to forget. The pilot testifies. The pilot's the only one that dropped any other names. For the most part, I believe one of the witnesses did a few, but nothing like the one pilot did. And the reason I wanted to point this out, he pointed out Kevin Spacey, Clinton, and Prince Andrews. Kevin Spacey, I believe he's facing some kind of a legal challenge right now. So that's a timely concern. A timely concern. That's why I brought that up. It's not really related to this, but obviously he's facing other charges that are similar. And I don't know when it was that he said this, but basically his defense is it wasn't sexual abuse. It was just child abuse, is what one of the quotes was in court. So I don't know. Weird. Then we had remember Viscosity, the pilot, was going on about these electronics going everywhere. Then we had Jane testify. From what I've seen with Annie today, Jane and Caroline are the two strongest witnesses. Jane was, they really tried hard the defense to smear her. And that's a tactic that they've long used. I mean, especially with Epstein, he had even more aggressive lawyers. Here's one of the quotes from the thing I'll read in a moment, the DOJ report. Epstein had some crazy lawyers. But Dershowitz was so overly aggressive and threatened, "We're going to destroy your witnesses. Don't go to court because we're going to destroy those girls." And Dershowitz so tainted the waters that Epstein also hired a local attorney. So, this guy, Epstein was hiring these super aggressive lawyers. And I think that all these name slips we saw last week, with Jane's name being slipped to the public twice, I don't know that was an accident. Because the way Epstein and their lawyers operate, they're very aggressive, Maxwell's probably got some of the same lawyers she had when Epstein, was being defended. So I assume she had the same pool of attorneys. God, that video quality is so terrible. Let me get to the other one. Boom. It's only letting me stream in SD today. So sad. So yeah, we know that they're very aggressive lawyers, these people. And today we had, Annie Farmer was testifying. We'll get to that in a moment. But I don't really know why they brought this girl on. I don't know. We'll get into that in a moment. Keep running through the rest of last week for a second here. Then we had the expert testimony on grooming. Then Juan Alisi testifies. He said he never saw anything, but if he wished he had, because he would have stopped it, right? And they keep revealing the name of Jane for some reason, and I think it's an attempt to keep other people from coming forward. We had last week the first Kate testified. She was seen very largely as uncredible. She even communicated with Epstein while he was in prison, like sending him letters and stuff, which I don't know, with a Stockholm syndrome, you start to love your capturer. So I don't know what was going on there. She was also 17, and so she wasn't underage because she was over in Europe. And, they had very, That was one of the most descriptive encounters with Epstein was, they had intercourse and all that. And other people were involved. Like at one point Epstein rang a bell or hit a buzzer and a girl came out of a doorway in the wall. She was just waiting there. A young girl. So really weird things happening. Again, a lot of this, even the prosecution, has to do with Epstein. And it does point to the defense's main argument that, hey, she's just a scapegoat for a man, right? So, I don't know. The prosecution, as bad as their arguments seem to be to me, the defense has even less somehow. And it's really hard to tell what's going on because we don't have cameras in there. Let me check. Right here. Boom. All right, how's everybody doing? You able to chat? Let's see, anybody chat. Let me see. Boom. All right, sweet. Both pilots didn't see anything on the planes. Yeah, no, neither one of them. Well, they did see the witnesses. The witnesses that are the accusers were seen on the planes, but no conduct of any type was seen. No, not by the pilots. Not either one of them. Yeah, the first person to testify this week was the second accuser, and she wasn't even paid by a tabloid. She worked for a tabloid to try and set up a royal family member to sell him cocaine so that they could, prosecute him or make a tabloid about him and make him look like a fool. So she just did weird things, especially talking to Epstein in prison by letters and stuff. It's hard to say that she was the victim and in court. Obviously, who knows what was going through her mind? But I'm talking about in a court of law. It just doesn't look good that she's still communicating with him after being abused, if that's what you're trying to convince the jury of. So then the third victim, and probably as credible, if not more so than Caroline, she testified on Tuesday, and we had the FBI agents come and discuss the evidence the same day. She broke down on the stand. She was 14 at the time. Her boyfriend brought her in. This is the youngest person that was there that we know of yet so far, because Annie was 16, the one that testified today. And yeah, I'm not going to go over all that in detail because we already went over that last video, but just wanted to cover the bases there. Caroline, yeah, she wished it never happened to her and all this, obviously. Her boyfriend testified after that. And really, beyond that, there's not much to cover because, that was up to Wednesday afternoon. We already covered that. Yesterday, they postponed it because a lawyer was sick. Today, we had somebody come on, and I'm not sure why they did this. It's a mystery to me. I don't know if there's accusers that are not going to testify, but they are part of the... they're still part of the complaints from the government, and they'll lay that out in their closing statements. But they had DMV witness Brown come on, and all Brown said, as far as we know, is he worked for the DMV, so he's an expert at driver's licenses. And William Brown says, are you aware of how to receive ID? How people receive ID cards? Yes. Please pick up the exhibit next to you. He picks it up. Presumably it's an ID. Look at the defense exhibit LD3A. It's in front of the binder. How old in 1996 was this person born in 1985? 11 years old. Next witness. So that led me to believe that Annie Farmer was going to be 11 in 1996 when she met Maxwell, but nobody so far has been 11 years old when they met her. So I don't know what that was about. Caroline was the youngest as far as I can recall. Kate was 17. Caroline was 14. Jane was 16, if I remember correctly, and so was Anne. So I don't know who this 11-year-old is that they're trying to point out here. It's really odd. The boyfriend seemed to be pimping. Well, the boyfriend, the boyfriend of Jane or Caroline was he was 17, I believe. Yeah, Kate had an older boyfriend. He was 35, so he might have known what was going on. But the Caroline's boyfriend was 17 at the time. She was 14. And if you told me when I was 17 years old, yeah, hey, an older person that I trusted was like, oh, hey, why don't you bring your girlfriend over? I'll give her $300 for a massage. I might be foolish enough to believe it. So I don't know what he was 17. So I don't know if he was doing it on purpose. I guess afterwards he was, because then it came out that his mother and he finally knew what was going on, and then they were addicted to drugs. So maybe he did know in the beginning. I don't know. I have no idea. There's no way to know. I don't know why I blocked that, Molly. It wasn't even that bad. A jealous old lady's vitriol 10 times worse than an abuser. I don't want to read the comments too much. I'll get distracted this early on. But yeah. So all that happened yesterday. Nothing happened because one of the attorneys was ill. So we don't know who that was. They didn't say. Presumably it was on the prosecution side because they were the one that called for a break, and then that's when court was dismissed. Yes, I don't know who. Does anybody know about that 11-year-old? Why they had the DMV guy come on and say this person was 11? The only thing I can think is that there are witnesses that aren't going to testify, but I don't think you can do that, so I don't know. Because what happened with Annie Farmer, I'll run through what happened to her. It was really odd that I don't understand why they brought her in, considering what happened to Jane and Caroline was so much more just actually illegal, whereas this was, the judge prefaced Annie's statements with the sexual contact in New Mexico was not illegal, which was the most intense thing that they covered. So I don't know. I'm trying to get that where you guys can see it, but but really I don't know why they brought Annie on, because I'll go through what she said. I'll read that because there's not much else to cover. There was some interesting things that I found in the DOJ report that I've been covering about the investigation and why they had shortcomings. And specifically, one of the problems they had was that in Florida, when they first got these complaints, was that the victims were so young, like they were 14, but they had prosecuted girls as young as 14 for prostitution. So they were like, oh, if they come testify, they might face charges for prostitution. That was one of the reasons that they didn't charge Epstein in the beginning, which is freaking ridiculous. Let me see if I can get myself together, man. Yeah, today I had all kinds of technical difficulty. I don't know what's going on with my thing. All right, let's jump up to the top here. I had everything up, but I had to reset my computer like 10 times. So now I gotta do it all on the fly again. Go figure. Yeah, so they had... Boom. All right, so yeah, he looks at that ID. Then Annie Farmer comes to the stand. Please take out... Okay, so the judge prefaced everything Annie says with, I instruct you that the physical conduct you will hear about in New Mexico was not illegal sexual activity, but it may be relevant, but not of propensity. Big words, big words. So that was the preface of what happened in New Mexico, which we'll get into in a moment. Most of the statements were about Epstein, so I don't know. In the state where you were born, Missouri, where'd you get your PhD? Texas, at University of Texas at Austin. How old were you when you gave Maxwell a massage? 16. And She was divorced. Her family was divorced. She had an older sister, 9 years older, who knew Epstein, worked for him. Epstein offered to fly Annie, out to New York City. She was excited. Her and her sister go to the movies, where Epstein sits in between them. Epstein's rubbing her leg throughout the movie, and he keeps hiding it every time her older sister looks over. And she said, I said, "Did you tell your sister?" She said, "No, I know she's very protective, but I was just confused," is basically what she was saying. And that's about all that happens in New York. So I guess they're just... the only thing I can think with Annie is she's the only one willing to come forward and show her identity. Maybe they want somebody to show who they're, be willing to be a public face of this to the jury, to show that not everyone's trying to hide. Even though, she wasn't raped or anything like that. It wasn't anything like that. It was very mild what happened to her, and the judge prefaced it by saying it wasn't illegal. So the only thing I can think is to show a pattern of behavior for the other witnesses. I'm not sure. So Epstein's home was very grand. Boom. We talked about her plans, UCLA. They talked about college. They went to the movies. This is a pattern we keep seeing. They take you to the movies, All right. Where did you next see Jeffrey Epstein? New Mexico. Who did you think you'd be seeing there? Lawyer. Objection. Sustained. I don't know what that was objecting to, but whatever. When you landed in New Mexico, what happened next? Annie Farmer. There was a man with a sign with my name on it. He drove us to the ranch. There I met Maxwell. She was slim and attractive. In her 30s, she was an adult. That was the first time she saw Maxwell in New Mexico. It was the very first time. She already met Epstein in New York. First time meeting Maxwell in New Mexico. What did she sound like? She had a British accent. I had been told that Maxwell would be there in New Mexico, and it made me more comfortable after what happened in New York. Who told you Maxwell would be there? My mother. I don't know even if you're divorced, why are you flying your daughter around by herself to go meet people you don't know? What did you and Maxwell talk about? My life, my school, British authors. Did you leave the ranch? Yes, a natural food store. Maxwell bought me a henna, into a Western wear store where she bought me cowboy boots. What did you think of the boots? They cost me over $100. I was grateful, gracious. We went to the movies. I didn't want to go because of what happened in New York, but I thought it would be different with Maxwell there. For how much of the movie did he touch you? Most of it. He didn't hide it either. And afterwards, back at the ranch, Maxwell told me to rub his feet, and she'd show me how. Later, Maxwell told me to get undressed and started rubbing my breasts. And then she goes to the bedroom. She's laying in bed. At one point, where did it go? Okay, I wanted to get off. She's laying in bed. I wanted out of there. The door was open, and I had a sense Epstein could see in. She's on the table. I don't think he got everything in the transcript out. I think she's on the massage table or something, and Maxwell might be massaging her. In the morning, Epstein came into my room and he wanted to cuddle. He climbed into my bed. I didn't like it. Did you tell him? No, there was no one else around. What happened? I went to the bathroom. I shut the door and I waited. And then she gets flown to Thailand by Epstein, and that was it. I'm not sure. Then there's cross-examination. Not much came of it other than this one statement. But all of that was prefaced. Yes, Maxwell touched her breast. But the judge prefaced that with what happened in New Mexico wasn't illegal. So I don't know why they're bringing her on. Again, maybe it's just the jury might think that the witness is more credible if she shows her true identity. And it might help the other witnesses' cases. I'm not sure. The defense, I don't know where they were going. I'm not going to... They asked who she told, the FBI, the media. She told her mother. The media didn't pay her. She does end up getting $1.5 million from the Epstein Fund, the Epstein Victims Fund. I mean, really, I don't... The defense has nothing. So, maybe their witnesses may help. I couldn't imagine they'll come up with any witnesses of value. But there was one line in here I wanted to catch. Actually, I'll just jump to my site because I put it on there. So, so back after cross-examination, the prosecution comes back up. Did you need a piece of paper to remember Maxwell touching her breasts? Objection. I guess I was overruled. I do not. It was distressing. Those are things that we remember. I believe they were trying to confuse me as to the boundaries, as to what was right and what was wrong in order to sexually abuse me. Maxwell's lawyer says objection. Surprisingly, based on this judge overruling nearly sustaining all of the defense's objections to most things, that was overruled, so they got that on the record. No further questions. So next witness. Annie Farmer, not much. Again, she was fondled by Maxwell allegedly, but the judge said it wasn't illegal. So I don't know. What do you guys think the point of that was, bringing her on? I don't know. I'm not sure if there's much of a point. It's hard to believe how far and wide all this goes. Oh, yeah, we'll get to that in a moment. I keep giving you all the things that I was going to get to in here, but I'll still read through it again anyways. In here, in the original report, the FBI was in contact with 29 witnesses, victims. Yeah. The state investigation had identified approximately 29 girls as victims of Epstein's conduct. That was Florida. That was just in Florida. So, there's a lot of people that we won't ever hear from. And a lot of them probably met Maxwell. I'll be good today. Thanks, Connie. Oh, Lord. Yeah, I don't know. Annie's testimony is odd to me. But, what else? Yeah, I mean, there really isn't much. Let's see what else there was since then from Inner City Press, because... I've covered about everything that's happened. There wasn't much to cover. The next witness is David Mulligan, now a baker. So this was just an hour ago. Annie Farmer's former boyfriend in high school. Did Annie tell you how the trip to Thailand was paid for? Yes, Jeffrey Epstein. What did Annie tell you about being in New York? That Epstein touched her leg in the theater and that she didn't want to say anything because Epstein was helping her sister, Maria's artistic career. So her sister's not testifying, but her sister would have been 9 years older than Annie. So whatever happened between Epstein and her could be considered consensual, I guess. Did Annie tell you that Maxwell touched her breast during a massage? Yes. Did Annie tell you that she didn't speak up? She was afraid of jeopardizing her sister Maria's opportunities with Epstein. Now, cross-examination by Steinem. You've seen things in the media about this, Mulligan. I'm not much of a news watcher. You know she made $1.5 million, right? I did not. Annie Farmer attended your recent wedding, correct? Yes. No further questions. See, I don't know. Where's the defense going with this? Why do you remember what Annie Farmer told you about New Mexico? These were big moments that we discussed while being physically affectionate with one another. No further questions. Next witness. The mother of Annie Farmer, Janice Sween. How old are you? 71. When did you speak with Jeffrey Epstein? When he wanted to take Maria on his plane to Florida on a work trip. Uh-huh. Well, Maria was the older sister, so. Then Epstein told me about meeting of students at his ranch in New Mexico to talk about college plans. I asked who would be chaperoning. He said Ghislaine would be there. Annie returned with a pair of black boots, she said. Epstein bought them for her. She seemed very tired. Later, I asked her what happened in New Mexico. What did she say? That she didn't want to talk about it. No further questions. You don't know if Maxwell was aware whether Maria would travel to New Mexico, do you? And when Annie was in Thailand, you were in Germany, correct? Yes. No further questions. The government rests. So the government has rested its case. So I imagine, I don't know if the defense will pick up today. Jury leaves. Maxwell's lawyer Everdale defense moves for acquittal. They're moving for acquittal. Oh, Lord. As to all counts, Everdale, yes. Counts depend on the testimony of Jane. There is no evidence that anyone persuaded or induced Jane to come to New York. Everdale, there is flying back and forth to Palm Beach. That is not enticing to New York. Accompanying is not encouraging. All Ghislaine did was paperwork. I guess they're trying to say the federal government doesn't have a case here because Ghislaine never... Because the only way the government can... I guess the federal government can prosecute this is if there was interstate travel. So I think what they're arguing is because Ghislaine didn't entice a minor to travel between states, it was Epstein. They were moving for an acquittal. Wow. The court should deny so the prosecution says the court should deny the motion. Jane was not in New York by accident. There was no sexualized reason. Jane said the defendant talked about sex with her. The enticement statute applies. So now there's a debate about whether the prosecution's rested. They're done. Now there's a debate as to whether or not enticement, Maxwell somehow enticed Jane to travel across state lines. So I guess the whole case pins on Jane and whether she was enticed to travel across state lines. Because what happened to Annie had nothing to do with Maxwell. It was all Epstein. I mean, it doesn't mean that she can't be prosecuted in the state, but they're saying the federal government. Well, that's news to me. I imagine it's news to you unless you've been reading this Twitter because that just happened. Motions are denied, Judge Nathan says. What do we want to discuss before Thursday? Team Maxwell, we want our witnesses anonymous too. Why? All right. I'll catch up to that again, but I'm going to read through this for a moment because what we're seeing throughout this trial, in my opinion, is dirty lawyer tactics. And that's what the FBI reported of too. Just dirty tactics, left and right. And it made it hard to prosecute in the beginning. Epstein. I'm talking about Epstein, but to me, Epstein and Maxwell are so tied together that, you know, they were too close for her not to know what was going on. Let me pull this up for you. So that's crazy. Thankfully that was denied. But you see the tactics they're trying to pull out of here. Boom, boom, boom. Where the hell? All right, pull this up for a moment. Just want to read some of this because it shows some of the tactics that Epstein has used. and his lawyers in order to keep this from being prosecuted to begin with, and why it's taken so long, and this and that. All right. So one of the biggest problems was there was problems with the witnesses. You know, I've already been reading. We're on page 14 of 300 so far. Records publicly released by the state's attorney office show that beginning in early 2006, attorneys for Epstein sought to persuade state prosecutors to allow Epstein to plead no contest rather than guilty. So, you know, even though they gave him this incredible deal with the non-prosecution agreement, he pushed back. Through their interviews with the victims, the police learned more about Epstein's conduct. Some girls had only one encounter with Epstein, while others had many with him. The nature of the massages varied. According to some victims, some girls remained fully clothed while they massaged Epstein. Some were only in their underwear. Some were fully nude. Victims stated that during these massages, Epstein would massage himself in a certain way. Some victims alleged that he touched them during the massage. Oh, did I read that? Oh, I already read that one. Sorry, guys. That was the whole digitally. Penetrated them digitally, and I didn't know what that meant. Okay. Everything we're talking about today had to do with the tactics leading up to the defense's tactics. So I read this earlier, but Dershowitz was so overly aggressive and threatened, "We're going to destroy your witnesses. Don't go to court. We're going to destroy those girls." This was Epstein's defense attorney before charges were even brought. "We're going to destroy those girls." I mean, I think Epstein already did the job, but, you know, a threat, you know, he can make a good threat, I guess. So Dershowitz was so toxic to the thing that Epstein had to hire a lawyer had a working relationship with the prosecution at that point. Meanwhile, the state's attorney's office took the unusual step of preparing to present the case to the grand jury. Kreischer told the OPR, Office of Public Professional Responsibility, that under state law as it existed until changed in 2016, his office prosecuted minors as young as 14 for prostitution. The possibility that Epstein's victims themselves could have been prosecuted caused great consternation within the office, and according to Kreischer, resulted in the decision to put the case before the grand jury. So one of the biggest problems they had with charging this to begin with was that that same prosecution team had been leveraging charges of prostitution against 14-year-olds already. So if 14-year-old victims, 15-year-old victims are coming up alleging that Epstein paid them for sex, well, you know, they're incriminating themselves of a crime that they might be charged for. Fortunately, he says that law was changed in 2016. Her office took the allegations against Epstein seriously because it was an organized scheme that involved young girls by offering them money. And I wouldn't say that we thought they were prostitutes, but I think there was solicitation. However, she said, although Epstein's behavior was reprehensible, I'm limited by the state statutes as to what I can charge. There are so many issues involving victim witnesses that, to my mind, in consultation with my prosecutors, the only way to achieve, to my mind, real justice was to present the case before a grand jury and not to direct file criminal charges against Epstein. Then they get into the same person saying he believes some of the victims weren't credible. So who knows if this guy, you know, this guy's points seem to be working. Like he could have been taking money under the table. Who knows? I'm not saying he was, but, you know, he constantly says the victims weren't credible. Yeah, I don't know. Who knows? In May of 2006, during a meeting, the detective expressed concern that pressure had been brought to bear on Kreischer by Epstein's attorney. And he and Chief Reiter were concerned that the state would charge Epstein with only a misdemeanor or not at all. So this goes to why the Palm Beach Police Department reached up to the FBI, because they couldn't do this on their own. They needed help. The detective explained that the defense had hired private investigators to trail Reiter and the detective had raised claims of various improprieties by the police, and in the view of the BPPD, had orchestrated the removal of the assistant state attorney initially assigned to handle the matter, who was viewed as an aggressive prosecutor, by hiring a defense attorney whose relationship with the assistant state attorney created a conflict of interest for the prosecutor. Further, given the missing computer equipment and surveillance camera videotapes, the detective believed Epstein may have been tipped off in advance to the search warrant. So, Epstein's attorneys hired... he was originally before a very tough prosecutor in Florida. Epstein's attorneys hired another attorney in order to create a conflict of interest with the prosecution, so that prosecution would have to recuse themselves from the case. That, and there was tips, when they went and raided his house with a search warrant, all the hard drives at that point were missing. So he was tipped off by someone on the inside. Could you imagine the mentality of these attorneys, like, to come up with this? These are dirty tactics. I want to write a book, like 100 Dirty Tactics by Epstein's attorneys. It's crazy. They hired an attorney to create intentionally a conflict of interest in the prosecution. That's just wild. On May 23rd, 2006, I don't know how to pronounce his name, Villafana prepared the paperwork for the USAO case file. Villafana told OPR in several aspects the case implicated federal interests and potentially merited a federal prosecution. The victimization of minors through the use and facilities of interstate commerce. That's what we were just talking about, right? There has to be interstate commerce, and the argument just raised in Maxwell's trial was, well, Maxwell didn't entice her. The number of victims involved, the possibility that Epstein had been producing or possessing child pornography, suggested by the removal of the computer equipment in his residence, the possibility that improper political pressure had affected the state attorney's office handling of the case. The investigation was named Operation Leap Year because the state investigation had identified approximately 29 girls as victims of Epstein's conduct. And we're only hearing from a few that, because Maxwell probably didn't know about them all, but she knew about a lot of them. I'm sure more than we're going to hear about. By late 2016, Villafana and the FBI identified several additional victims, obtained some flight manifest, telephone messages, and cell phone recordings that showed communication and travel in interstate commerce by Epstein and his associates. Villafana reported to her supervisors that the state attorney's office would not provide transcripts to the grand jury voluntarily, and that she would be meeting with Chief Ryder to convince him to relinquish the evidence to the FBI. Villafana also told her superiors that she expected a number of flights over her documented demands, and that some parties were refusing to comply after having contact with Epstein or his attorneys. Villafana's reference to anticipated fights and lack of compliance led Sloman to ask whether she was referring to the victims. Villafana responded that the problems did not involve victims, but rather a former employee of Epstein and some business entities that had objected to document demands as overly burdensome. Villafana explained to Sloman and Lori that some victims were scared or embarrassed, and some had been intimidated by the defense. But everyone with whom the agents spoken with so far were willing to tell their story. So we had, a lot of the FBI is finding the victims were being intimidated, which isn't surprising. They were tailing the police and trying to intimidate them in various means. Again, just reading from the DOJ report on Epstein, the Office of Professional Responsibility as to why he got the non-prosecution agreement. Because it gives us a huge background into this case. Epstein wanted to be as transparent as possible, he said, allegedly. So Epstein says he wants to be transparent as possible. They asked him for the computer hard drives, the CPUs, and all that. And shocking, he did not comply. that's where we got to now. That's where we're at now with that. But I read from that Wednesday too, and we had I believe Caroline was one of the victims that was written about in here. I mean, that's let's see what's going on there. We just had a motion by the defense to dismiss the case on acquittal based on the fact that they said that Maxwell didn't entice Jane to travel across state lines. The judge did deny that motion. The prosecution has rested their arguments, and the defense, I believe, is about to begin. Let's see where we left off. Defense moves for acquittal. Blah, blah. Judge Nathan, motions are denied. What are we expected to discuss Thursday? We want our witnesses to remain anonymous too, says Team Maxwell. Judge Nathan, it should have been raised earlier. The earliest decision I can give you is on Wednesday evening in charging conference on Saturday, December 18th. Oh, let me pull that up for you guys. So defense case 16th and 17th, Maxwell's lawyer, into the 20th. So closing arguments on the 21st. Steinman, we don't want the jury to rush to decide before Christmas holiday. So I guess they want the defense now says they want their witnesses to remain anonymous. Why? Because they're going to lie? I mean, what? Why does it... What? I don't even understand. I guess they could have... Are they going to say things that might incriminate themselves? What reason could the defense possibly have for their witnesses to remain anonymous? The judge says the earliest she can make a decision is by Wednesday. So I guess the defense starts their case the 16th, Thursday. Thank goodness that I won't have anything to cover because I'm getting worn out. Oh, Lord, they'll let me catch up on my other things with nothing going on. We'll keep checking back with the Inner City Press, but they're basically just discussing the case. Basically, the defense thinks they're going to have their case laid out by the 21st. So they're only going to take a couple days. And I guess their main concern is that the jury doesn't have to rush to get out before Christmas. So it's likely that we're going to see the decision sometime in January after the holidays. So what, January 2nd, 3rd, or 4th or something? You know, whenever the jury deliberates. I guess it'd be, I'm just going to guess here. Let's see. I was already wrong with saying Virginia Roberts might be the next to testify, which wasn't the case. So I bet, the first week of January, that's probably when we'll see the, unless you think, I don't know, when, are they really going to have court on and off through Christmas? I guess if so, it could be the 30th. I mean, who knows? I don't know. When do you guys think it'll be acquitted? Let's see. That's the poll here. When will the jury reach... This is the most speculative poll I've created so far. Reach a verdict. December or January? What do you guys think? When are they going to reach the verdict? Give me an exact date in the chat if you think. I'm thinking, I don't know. I have no idea. All right, I'll check out. Let's see. Ann Coulter wrote a big on Barry Christianer. Is that who I was just reading about? That's what I was reading about, right? Is that why you brought that up? Yeah, Barry Kreischer. Yeah, he said that he was saying there was witness problems, that attorneys sought relief, blah, 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 blah. He seemed at points to be, I don't know, undermining things. I'm not sure. I'll have to check that out. Did she seem to think he was corrupt? What did the report say? She was the only one who talked about him. She was also down on Alex Acosta. Yeah, he had to resign because of because of this. No, not another poll, Connie. Hey, I got the poll power up here. Okay, I have the pulpit, as they say. Sorry, guys, my humor's dry lately because, Lord, Paul's saying a lot here that's interesting. Let's see. I'll try and run through what he's saying. Because he's talking about Kreischer, which was one of the people originally responsible for charging Epstein. Barry Kreischer was the Palm Beach County DA in 2005 when the Palm Beach Chief of Police brought all the evidence to him for prosecution. Barry, not knowing who Epstein was, told the chief he couldn't wait to prosecute. When he found out it was Epstein, a huge donor for the Democrat Party, he went to the grand jury route. Okay. He did that because of politics. Kreischer was a Democrat and Epstein was his political ally. That enraged the chief of police, which is why he went to the FBI and the state of Florida. That is how Alex Acosta got involved. And okay, I'm glad you're laying this out. Kreischer's argument not to prosecute Epstein back in 2005 because he would have had to prosecute the 14-year-old girls for prostitution was an excuse. That's crazy, right? He wrote Epstein a non-prosecution agreement, but couldn't come up with one for 14-year-old girls who were coerced. I get charging a 14-year-old girl for prostitution if she's prostituting herself to people under 18 or so, right? That's arguable because you don't want to allow that sort of behavior, especially with someone that young. You want, obviously that person's got bigger problems and jail's not going to solve it, but I understand prosecuting prostitution in a 14-year-old if she's, doing it with her peers. But the moment you're talking about an old man paying a young girl for sex, prostitution should be just out the window. And I guess in 2016 the law changed. I don't know what that law is now. 2016 prosecution law. Oh man, I'm gonna have a hard time finding that. Florida Amendment 14. Let's see. Yeah, I'm not gonna find that. If anybody knows, Justice for oh, there we go. I see the Justice for Victims Act of Trafficking Act 2015. It passed the Senate, passed the House, to the President, became law. This section amends the Federal Criminal Code to impose an additional assessment. Fiscal year crap. Is that the... I don't know if this is the law they're referring to in 2016, because I think that was a Florida law, not a federal law. But maybe the federal law overruled it. But thankfully that has, because that was something I was like, well, how can we make changes? When I read that, that was something that stood out to me. I was like, we need to change this. But fortunately, after reading it a second time, I didn't catch it the first time. I see that it's been changed. But yeah, what a lame excuse. Kreischer's excuse. Kreischer's argument not to prosecute Epstein back in 2005 because of he would have to prosecute 14-year-olds for prostitution was an excuse, says Paul. I mean, he seems to have, I haven't verified what Paul's saying, but it seems to be legit here. He was going to prosecute until he discovered it was Epstein. Yeah, so what Paul's saying is the reason that he didn't prosecute was because Epstein was a huge donor to the Democrat Party. And he was what a terrible thing. Case says a person under the age of 18 who is a minor and cannot legally consent to sex with an adult. With an adult would be my amendment. I mean, prosecuting a 14-year-old girl or a 14-year-old is ridiculous, especially when people purchase. Yeah, when, like I said, yeah, when an older person is paying that, yeah, you can't be. That's crazy. But I do understand if it's like two 14-year-olds and one's like, I mean, they should both be prosecuted, both. If they're like 14 and 15 or something, you know, like then you don't want that to happen. They got to be told that that's wrong. But yeah, I mean, it is absurd, and I guess it's been overruled, so that law has been changed, which is, I mean, geez. Well, yeah, some of those dirty tricks, man. Like hiring the Epstein's attorneys, hiring an attorney to create a conflict of interest with the prosecution. So who knows what, dirty tricks Maxwell's lawyers are doing. I think that when they were saying repeatedly the real name of Jane, who they just admitted was the main witness, when they were saying that her real name, it was an attempt to intimidate her and other witnesses that might come forth for sure. And again, according to the state's investigation, under Operation Leap Year, I didn't look this up yet, because the state investigation had identified approximately 29 girls as victims of Epstein's conduct. 29. And we've hardly heard of any of them. Yeah, the majority of them were from broken homes. Yeah, that's the thing is, a lot of, when you first hear about child trafficking and stuff, and the main argument against, I just saw a video on MSNBC, they're like, oh, there's conspiracy theorists out there say hundreds of thousands of children are going missing, and they're being trafficked every year. Well, that's kind of a straw man argument. There are hundreds of thousands of girls being trafficked in the States every year, probably. I don't know if it's that many, but there's a lot. But it's a straw man argument to say that they need to go missing. None of Epstein's victims went missing. None of the ones we know of went missing. Their mothers knew where they were. Their boyfriends brought them into it. Their mothers drove them to Epstein. They were being trafficked nonetheless, in my opinion. So just because there might not be, because they pick an argument, and it's the same argument that's floated around since whenever Pizzagate was. What was that? 2016. It's the same argument, and I saw it for years before that. It was a meme. Something like 100,000 children go missing every year, and in the context that all these children are being brought into human trafficking. I think that that's a bad argument, but I'll explain why in a second. I think that it's one of those arguments that is intentionally put out there to mislead people, because the thing is, most of those people do get found. There's 100,000 reported missing. The meme doesn't say how many get found within 24 hours, which is most of them. But it also is misleading because just because a girl isn't missing doesn't mean she's not being trafficked. A lot of these girls, they're known. We know where they're at. We don't know, but people know. Their mothers, their fathers, their brothers, their sisters, their boyfriends know where they're at. They're not missing, but they're being trafficked for sex. And a lot of people being trafficked for sex are minors coming in from Mexico too. I mean, like, where are those minors going? We got children coming across the border in waves without parents, and and then we were separating. I mean, they're defending sex trafficking in the public with the whole thing about, oh, they're putting children in cages and separating them from their families. Yeah, to see if they're really their children. We don't know who these people are. They're coming across the border. How do we know that they're not being paid to bring children into the States to be trafficked? I mean, ridiculous. Does anyone know about that 2016 law change? Wow, we started off with the solid, I think it was 100% January 1st. And Connie, I hope you put your 2 cents in on this poll. I know you love them. We started off at 100%, I believe, in January, and now we're almost 50-50. 53% January, 47% in December. Not another poll. You're funny. Yeah, there were drug addicts, and hold on. Paul's got some. I'll just read. Paul's giving me a script here to read. I'm just kidding. Yeah. Okay. Ann Coulter was the one who mentioned this. The grand jury route was a weak one. Yeah, I thought so too when I was reading it. I haven't even heard of Kreischer or any of that until I read this. I was reading, I was like, really? Barry is to be blamed here, politics, and 14-year-old girls, no jury would convict them. Yeah, that's true. There's no way. Is anybody, they were drug addicts and needed access to cash. Epstein knew that. Yeah, that's another thing too. I mean, a lot of these 14-year-olds, they're not only from broken families, they're addicted to drugs. And maybe that's probably how they fall into it. You're 14. Probably your first step isn't to sell your body for sex. You're probably doing drugs with your friends. You want to keep doing drugs because they help you forget about your broken household. And then you meet an older man who says, "Oh, I'll give you some money. I'll pay you for that." And dude, I was such a fool. I met so many people that tried to groom me when I was older. And it took me, like, when I was over 18, I was never a minor, but, I didn't get what was going on until I was, like, 21 with these older men. Like, because for some reason, gay men were super attracted to me. It was weird. I don't know why. If only women were as attracted to me as gay men. It's terrible. Kind of information is never communicated on the mainstream media. Yeah, Paul. I mean, Paul. This whole report too, though. We bash the mainstream media, but the whole report, everything about Epstein, came back to the forefront because of an article posted by the Miami Herald. So the newspaper they were doing some real journalism. They posted this intense report on Epstein, and that was the whole reason that this 300-page report from the FBI came out. The charges get brought back up against Epstein, and now we see Maxwell in jail. Because of that press release, or whatever, report, journalism, whatever you want to call it. I don't think, yeah, somebody's saying somebody's blaming the victims. It is, yeah, that's the thing is it's, Adam said blame the victim. Who said that? Who's blaming the victims, Adam? I mean, that is what the defense's strategy is a lot of times. Oh, you were using him for drugs, right? You did cocaine with him, right? Like, but it's like, yeah, she was 14, and she didn't do the cocaine thing didn't happen, but they were using drugs. They were young, impressionable girls that didn't know what the heck was going on. And yeah, it's broken families that leads to this. It's not, like I was saying earlier, it's not that, I mean, surely there are children that have been kidnapped and brought into sex trafficking by strangers. That's not what's happening for the most part, though. Like 80-90% of these encounters, at least, if not 99%, are their family getting them involved. People they know. It's almost always someone they know. The same thing with murder. I mean, there's not very many people that go around just murdering strangers. It's usually somebody they know. Let's see. Inner City Press got anything new? So we just had the defense motion for... That was probably the most interesting thing to me today. The defense tried to motion for acquittal based on the fact that Maxwell was not involved in enticing minors to travel across state lines, which was denied by the judge. And then they're discussing the dates. The defense's case on the 16th and the 17th, Maxwell's lawyer into the 20th. So closing arguments on the 21st. Steinman, I don't want them to have to rush before holidays. We'll see where we are then, basically. It'll only be... So the U.S. has already said there will be a rebuttal case. It will only be a rebuttal expert. We'll be ready to close the day after that day evidence. So adjourned. Out into the streets. So the prosecution will have a rebuttal to whatever the defense lays out. and then there'll be final arguments around the 21st, 22nd, and then we got literally dead center 50-50 on whether that will be January or December. Yeah, I mean, the thing is like with a case like this, yes, it's interesting. It points to huge things. You know, we got Kevin Spacey's name was dropped by the pilot last week, and he's facing charges for sex with a child or something like this. At the same time, unrelated, but I mean, you know, his name was on. You know, he was on the plane, so I don't know. But the thing is like, while we're keeping track of these cases, and I think it's good to. This is what we need to be paying attention to, in my opinion, instead of, you know, what Biden's saying or doing. Like, for the most part, I mean, whatever. But while we pay attention to stuff like this, it's important that we think of ways that we can make things better in the future, right? We got to find solutions, which, if it wasn't overturned, would be not prosecuting 14-year-old girls for prostitution with adults. I mean, that's just absurd. And just being aware, you know, how just talking with people about this too, and being aware that it's broken households that leads to this for the most part. It's divorced families, struggling financially, single mothers, single fathers. It's rarely, you know, a well put together nuclear family, right? Yeah, and drug addiction is a huge thing too. You're talking about a 14-year-old starting to smoke pot and whatever, hanging out with their friends. You're in a broken family. You want to forget that your father's abusing you at home or your mother's abusing you at home. You know, you start doing drugs. You get into drugs. You want to buy more drugs. You're 14. How do you make money? You know, an older man comes along. Just we got to be aware of how these things happen, because it's not as if Epstein. I'm not saying people will say, "Oh, he was," though. It's not as if Epstein was going around kidnapping girls off the streets. We got to be aware of how he was doing, how he was getting in contact with these girls, by using their drug addiction, by using their broken families, by using their boyfriends maybe their boyfriends were drug addicts and their boyfriends wanted money and the girlfriend wants to help the boyfriend out. It's like, I mean, it's dark stuff, but we gotta. Who is James Coburn? I've seen worse. Young adults don't know what they're getting into. Don't always know what they're getting into, says Kathy, when they realize it's a little bit late and bigger than a child's mind can control. Look, I don't know what it's like to be a child being taken advantage of, fortunately. But when I was like 18 and 19 and 20, I can count 5 in my head right now. 5 different men groomed me. It never worked. 6 different men groomed me because I was just so trusting of people, and gay people come off super friendly. You know? They come off super friendly. And they started, you know, it is grooming. I guess you call it, because I wasn't underage. That was one thing I wanted to say. So it was grooming. I'm going to define it as grooming, and I'll make that claim because of what I forgot to bring up earlier. And I was just going to say, this is important if you're ever talking to the police, because of what the FBI said here. I don't know if I can find it right now, of course. I somehow didn't just read it, and I know I didn't, but... Oh, yeah, there we go. Because Epstein said he wanted to be transparent, right? So they pretend, but they asked him for the information, the computer stuff that was missing, and he didn't get it to them. And I wanted to read this because it was just kind of a funny little thing where... So Lori, one of the detectives, goes to talk to him, and what she says here... And this is what I'm saying about grooming. The FBI is essentially grooming Epstein in this situation, if you define it this way. And this is kind of establishes what a definition of grooming is. Part of it. Also believe that as a general matter, prosecutors should grant defense requests to make a presentation because part of the process is for them to believe they are heard. Part of the process is for them to believe they are heard. It doesn't mean they're actually listening it doesn't mean they're actually listening to what you're trying to present. They're listening to maybe, but they're trying to make their own case, right? And part of what these girls go and they believe they're being heard. They believe that they're getting what they want out of it. They finally think that they're getting somewhere in life, right? And they're just being taken advantage of. And then so Villafani goes and talks to Epstein because he wanted to make them believe that he was being heard. And then Villafani told Lori, I just get to listen to the pitch and hear about how the girls are liars and drug users. It was way too early, so he basically just he was kind of mad that he even went because it was essentially a waste of time. But I think Epstein met Virginia Roberts at Mar-a-Lago. Virginia was the daughter of Sky Roberts. Sky worked at Mar-a-Lago, probably. And Virginia Roberts, I thought she was going to testify because I think Caroline was recruited by Virginia Roberts. But it's like they were both underage, right? So it's like it's hard to fault Virginia Roberts. I don't know. Who knows what she was going through, right? Adolescent brains don't stop developing until 25. Any trauma prior to that affects brain development, and you are more susceptible to engaging in risky behavior to deal with the trauma. Yeah, that was my thing, is like I was able to like skirt the grooming of these older men without being taken advantage of because I had up until that point a relatively normal childhood. I wasn't abused like that, so I knew what was going on at some point. But still, it was weird to me. It's like, somebody wants to hang out with you. I was like homeless. They'd be like, "Oh, come on, we'll get a hotel room." And I'm like, dude. I told the one guy, I was like, dude, I'm not interested in that, but I'd love to hang out with you. You seem cool. Of course, then it just carries on. I was retarded, man. It was about when I was, I think around 22. I was like, all right, dude. You guys are ridiculous. Because, people buying me hotel rooms was nothing when I was, like, homeless and traveling. It wasn't unusual. But, I guess I was a little too close to San Francisco. Oh, yeah, it's 7. There's 7. Some guy tried to get me to go. See, that was the one. I was witty enough by the time I was in San Francisco, and this guy's like, hey, you want to go to the bathhouse with me? First time in San Francisco, I was like, no. I don't know. Unfortunately, I had good friends out there, too. So it's not like I was, like, on my own. They get them from foster care, especially the ones they know are aging out. Many different stories. Yeah, foster care, but again, broken. It's all stemming for It's all stemming from some people come out of the left field. Even if it's coming from foster care, that still stems from a broken family, a broken house, right? And what I was saying earlier, I don't think I finished my point, was that as we were watching cases like this and we're having discussions, it's very important to discuss where things went wrong and how we can make them better in the future and how we can address these issues in the future. And I already read everything. We're basically wrapped up. I'm just kind of looking at the chat because I haven't had the chance to look at it yet for the most part. She was 16, so Virginia was 16. when she, or 15 when she got involved with Epstein. Unfortunately, she was recruiting a few of those girls from West Palm Beach, including Caroline, I believe. James Comey's daughter was not likely to put Virginia Roberts on the stand because if she did, the prosecution could ask about what she was doing in Southeast Asia. Epstein sent Roberts to Southeast Asia to learn massage school. But what was she doing there was recruiting other girls from Asia. This was where she met her husband from Australia. He rescued Roberts and married her at the age of 19. That was how she got out. Yeah, I mean, but Paul, it's like at a certain point, it's like Virginia Roberts was, how old was she when she first got involved, right? Once you get sucked in that world, you think that's normal. How did the girls get passports, says JP? Good question. Their parents helped them in a lot of the cases. More education to our youth on sexual abuse and human trafficking is key to reducing in the future. Yeah. See, because that's right. So Kay said that, and I we harp on in schools, everybody gets taught about drug addiction, but, there's nothing about sex trafficking or how to spot predators. I mean, why not teach children about that? How to spot a sexual predator. How about that? That needs to be a course for, that's a elementary school course, probably you don't want to teach them too young. You don't want to make them crazy. But, when they're like 12, 13, you're already teaching them sex. It's like, why not teach them how to spot a sexual predator as part of that? Teach them about grooming and how people take advantage of youth. I think it's important how and why they had passports. JP, their parents knew they were going. Their parents helped them get the passports, I'm sure. Spacey got kicked off the island because he was scaring too many guests. Did you guys see that new Reno 911 movie where it's all about QAnon and they're making fun of QAnon? But not only that, they go to Jeffrey Epstein's island to fight QAnon. They basically make it look like it was a conspiracy theory that, well, I mean, it is a conspiracy theory, but what Epstein was doing there when it's, he admitted to it, basically. We know what he was doing. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I'm not afraid of the word conspiracy theory because everything's like a theory. And it is a conspiracy theory. You know who the number one conspiracy theorist in the country is? The Department of Justice, the FBI. They're the ones coming out with the most theories about conspiracies going on that there is. I mean, that's like their job. Theorizing about conspiracies that might be occurring and prosecuting them. Yeah. Yeah. James, I don't know where are you even coming from, bro? You just speaking out your ass. All right. Everything's done for the day. We went through today. Not much. What are we going to look for? Well, we already know the defense's main thing, and I'm sure they're going to bring it up again because it is their main argument. It is their main possibility of getting out of this. Did Maxwell entice minors to travel across state lines? Because if she didn't, the federal case kind of falls apart. See you, Paul. Thanks for the info. Ralph. I don't even want to read it because anytime I mention anything about that, like literally, if I mention anything about the I've done it a few times. I try to stream about the just the laws about what's been happening the last couple years, last 2 years. Even if I stream about the laws about it, YouTube does not send it out to anyone. It's weird. So I don't even want to mention it on this. I don't want to conflate the two. I'll talk about it separately because it seems to be they only censor one video when I talk about it. As in, they don't push it out. Alec Baldwin's daughter released a recorded message from her father that will clarify what I'm saying. About what? About being sold into this? Oh, Spacey getting kicked off the island? Oh, Lord. All right, guys. Be sure to like, subscribe. I'm done. I don't know. Once I get done, I'm just like, I'm done with all the hard stuff, so I'll just sit here and enjoy myself for a moment because I like reading the chat, but I don't have much to say at this point. Wake up. Don't be sleeping sheep. This is Polio. No, yeah, a lot of lawsuits. Polio, watch my last video. I just did an interview with a guest about all that kind of stuff. And this guy in Missouri, he overturned all of that stuff with one lawsuit, and he's running for Senate. Ben Brown. You can find it was my last video, my last live stream. And it was the one nobody. I don't think the push notification goes out. Go check it out. Because that's the kind of stuff I really like covering. Is that. But like I said, anytime I mention it, you get the little disclaimer below the video, and I don't think it recommends it to anyone. Somehow, this is not being censored by YouTube. So that's good. The Maxwell trial isn't. I actually put in, I put in Maxwell sketch artist earlier, and my video was the second one. So I was like, okay, that's pretty funny. So it's not really... This isn't being censored, but the other thing that I cover is. Yeah, have a good one, Polio. Is Twitter down? I don't know. Probably not, no. I'm on it right now. You crazy? Too much info to convict Maxwell. I don't know, guys. Yeah, go check out that last video if you're interested in those, those things, and the laws about them and the court orders. There's been a lot of pushback this week. I don't want a disclaimer under this video. Oh, Lord. All right, guys. Take care.